The rest of the story. Once upon a time, there was an interior decorator named Jim and an auto mechanic named Charlie who went on a car trip together, their intended destination, the record book. For as far as either knew, nobody had ever before driven an automobile coast to coast and back without once shutting off the engine. There were plenty of reasons not to try it. The risk of starting a fire while refueling, for example, especially in Charlie's old Ford. Still, they took the idea to a Texaco Oil Company executive named Vos, and he agreed their proposed adventure would be a viable publicity stunt. And then he made Jim and Charlie a deal. If that crate lasts 500 miles, he said, then Texaco will underwrite the entire trip. And they shook on it. Charlie tuned up the old Ford as carefully as he could. It was late July before he was satisfied the car was mechanically perfect. And so on the 26th, Jim Hargis and Charlie Creighton embarked on their bold journey, New York to Los Angeles and back, with the motor running all the way. Taking turns at the wheel, they reached L.A. on the 13th of August. By then, the trip had attracted considerable attention. Reporters were amused to learn that the pair had been arrested in Pennsylvania for creating a public disturbance. Also, that they'd hit a skunk in the road in Ohio, and the odor from that had not completely dissipated yet. And with the Texaco insignia emblazoned on the doors of the old Ford, a friendly nickname had been adopted along the way. Their car was now being called the Star. As of their arrival in Los Angeles, the Star had been running continuously for 456 hours. That's 19 straight days. Now the return trip is underway. And that was finished on Sunday, September 7, when Jim and Charlie drove into the plaza at the end of Battery Place, New York, New York. Photographers were poised to preserve for posterity the most momentous moment of the trek of the Star, that at which for the first time in 42 days, the engine of Charlie's old Ford would at last rest. Texaco officials were present to congratulate the intrepid travelers. What they accomplished would be newsworthy today. But it was all the more incredible when they completed their journey in September of 1930. You see, the Star, Charlie Creighton's old crate, was a Model A Ford Roadster, and the fastest it had driven throughout the entire trip was at 11 miles an hour. And what makes that remarkable is this. Had Jim and Charlie merely kept their car running coast to coast, you'd probably never have heard of them. But the reason they are now and always will be remembered in the annals of automotive achievement is that when they started their transcontinental round trip in New York City, Charlie's Model A was facing the Atlantic Ocean. And yes, I do mean to say, Jim Hargis and Charlie Creighton made history by driving New York to Los Angeles and back 42 days, 7,180 miles in reverse. They saw America backward. And now you know the rest of the story.
Hello, Paul Harvey fans. Welcome to the rest of the story. You know, there's more to this story that you may be interested to know. When asked why they planned to take this odd trip, Jim Hargis replied, "It may seem nutty, but we just wanted to show that such a trip could be made." Now let's talk about their car. 26-year-old James Jim Hargis and 22-year-old Charles Creighton had to make sure their 1929 Ford Model A Roadster wouldn't break down. They tuned up the engine with new spark plugs and plug wires, installed brand new tires all around, including spare tires, and carried spare parts with them. They decided to simplify matters. Less parts meant less chances of breakdowns. They removed all the forward gears from the car's transmission. The only gear they left in the car was reverse. They attached headlights to the back of the car and brake lights to the front of the car. They mounted a large mirror to the windshield, which provided them with a clear view of the road behind them. They removed part of the rear seat and installed a mattress in its place so the drivers could take turns sleeping. While sleeping, the person's head and shoulders would be in the turtleback at the rear of the car. Now, we normally refer to the turtleback of a car these days as the rumble seat. The logistics of successfully completing this journey seem impossible. How did they pull it off? Here's where there's a little more to the story than originally thought. 4 men took the trip in 2 separate cars. 47-year-old Ed Marshall and 22-year-old Walter Young drove what newspapers dubbed the refueler car. The purpose of the refueler car was to drive ahead of the nonstop car for the purpose of arranging motorcycle escorts through cities and for acquiring gasoline, oil, food, drinks, and whatever else they might need along their journey. On July 15, 1930, they left their hometown of St. Louis, Missouri, en route to New York City, where their journey would officially begin. At 1:30 on July 26, 1930, the nonstop and the refueler left Battery Park in New York City. They hoped to reach San Francisco by August the 10th. They quickly learned that the mirror didn't work so well in heavy traffic, and the driver had to twist around in his seat while driving through cities. At 9:30 in the morning on August the 1st, after 6 full days and nights of driving, the nonstop, led by police motorcycles, and the refueler arrived at the Municipal Bridge in St. Louis, Missouri. Now that same trip today would take just under 15 hours. It took them 6 days. While in St. Louis, Jim Hargis took a break from the nonstop car to visit a friend. Charles Crichton's wife took the opportunity to take an unforgettable ride in the nonstop car on a police-escorted tour of the city. Marshall and Young paid brief visits to their families before rejoining Jim and Charles. After their brief break, the 2 cars left St. Louis on the now historic Route 66. On Wednesday, August the 13th, Jim and Charles stopped their car in front of the Los Angeles City Hall. For 5 minutes, the pair told newspapers of their backwards travel, gazed at the tall buildings surrounding them, all the while massaging their sore necks. They told the newspaper men that they had driven an average speed of 8 miles per hour and hadn't killed the engine in 456 hours. "We're just seeing America backwards," Charles said, "but it looks much the same either way." After the short pause, they reversed their way towards San Francisco, and on August the 15th, Jim and Charles left San Francisco and headed backwards toward New York. Of course, Jim and Charles had naysayers. While most cities and towns along their route described their trip with enthusiasm and interest, the Lola Register said James B. Hargins and Charles Crichton drove an automobile in reverse gear all the way from New York to Los Angeles. This 2-sentence article ended with, "What of it?" The Grand Island Daily Independent reported, "Of course, the whole thing is a pure and simple advertising stunt for Texaco products and the Ford car." They were at least half right. We don't know that they were connected with Ford in any way. While in Omaha, Nebraska, traffic officer J.J. Zaleski arrested Jim and Charles for driving the car in reverse through town. They were careful not to turn the engine off, but they were quickly released when Traffic Captain Payne was unable to find that they had violated any laws. Finally, on September 8, 1930, after 42 days of driving in reverse from one end of the continent to the other and back, Jim and Charles backed the Model A into a plaza at the southern tip of Manhattan and took a long breath before posing for pictures. The average speed for their trip was a whopping 6.5 miles per hour, but they had done it. When they set off, their odometer registered 16,000 miles. When they arrived back in New York, their odometer registered 8,820 miles. See, the type of speedometer in their Model A went backward when the car was reversed. What an adventure it would have been to drive across the continent in reverse, regardless of the stiff neck. Laws in every state would prevent this sort of adventure today. What kind of interesting automobile adventures have you had in your life? Let me know in the comments. I'm Brad Dison. Thank you very much for watching. And as Paul Harvey would say, good day.